Hey y'all, thanks for joining me for this very complex subject that I've dove into and done research on for this past few days, but I will try to present it to you as coherently as possible because of all the information I have to share with you. It'll be in a series, so many segments. So this is the first part, and there's probably going to be about 3 parts, but it's very important because I decided to look into this not only because of our discussion on the PHANAR and the UOC and the Russian Church and all that. It was because of our discussion and curiosity to want to know exactly what the total history is that I can look at, not total actually, but at least get more information on what's been going on with the Ecumenical Patriarch. So that's where we're going to start here on how all of this came about with the situation with the canonicity and the Diaspora, the autocephalous churches, and all that in regard to these 3 different areas: Ukraine, Russia, and Constantinople, basically. So, the Greek Orthodox Archdiocese of America supports financially the Ecumenical Patriarch. It is an eparchy. GOARCH is an eparchy, province of the Ecumenical Patriarchate. They allocate about $1.5 million a year to the Ecumenical Patriarch, the PHANAR. Now we're going to go back into history on how this came about with how the EP is structured and the Canon 28 issue, and we're going to go through this particular portion right now. This goes back to Meletios. He was the patriarch for a couple years. He served 1921 to 1923. He was a pivotal figure in shifting the EP's role toward its modern, more centralized form. So here's the shift. He's the architect of the modern PHANAR Constantinople strategy for several reasons. I've read all the articles on this, and so now I'm getting the summarized version here. So it's the Diaspora claim. So that is an important portion that was going on in the time he was in the 20s. Actually, it started before that, I think in 1908. So there was a lot of Greek Orthodox coming into America, and so they had to figure out how to deal with the jurisdiction issue and the diocese and all of the churches to fit under the Greek Orthodox Church. And so that's what that's talking about there. He was the first to systematically apply Canon 28 of Chalcedon to claim that all quote-unquote barbarian lands, territories not explicitly under another ancient patriarchate, like the Americas and Australia, belong exclusively to Constantinople. The expansion in crisis. Okay, he took advantage of the collapse of the Russian Empire and the persecution of the Russian Church to pull territories like Finland and Estonia under his jurisdiction, citing Moscow's inability to govern. And then there was the calendar and reform. He pushed through the new calendar, revised Julian, at the 1923 Pan-Orthodox Congress, a move that remains a point of deep division, and it's often cited by critics as an example of unilateral innovations. So yeah, there's the unilateral. Yes. Okay. In this article under Orthodox history, talks about, so we know what Canon 28 is. They said the barbarian lands, it has to do with that. It acknowledges that the Bishop of Constantinople now has privileges equal to the Bishop of Rome due to the fact that Constantinople is now the imperial capital and the seat of the Senate. In the second half of the canon, it declares, only the metropolitans of Pontian, Asian, and Thracian dioceses, as well as the bishops of the aforementioned dioceses among barbarians, are ordained by the aforementioned most holy throne of the most holy Church of Constantinople. This phrase, the bishops of the aforementioned dioceses among barbarians, is central to the Ecumenical Patriarch's canonical claim to exclusive jurisdiction of the Diaspora, as we've talked about. So this is from the Greek, or actually the Holy Cross Greek Orthodox School of Theology in 2009, the leadership of the EP, and the significance of Canon 28 of Chalcedon. The statement included the following paragraph: Canon 28 of Chalcedon explicitly granted to the Bishop of Constantinople the pastoral care for those territories beyond the geographical boundaries of the other local autocephalous churches at the time of the 5th century. These regions commonly referred to as barbarian nations because they were outside the Byzantine Commonwealth. St. Paul in Romans 1:14 also had used the term barbarians to refer to those beyond the old Roman Empire. Canon 28 of Chalcedon appears to clarify the reference in Canon 2 of the Council of Constantinople, which says that churches in the barbarian nations should be governed according to the tradition established by the fathers. The author of this article is saying that they're talking about the barbarian lands theory fully set forth. And he says, as articulated by the Holy Cross faculty, Canon 28's reference to the bishops of aforementioned diocese among barbarians was meant by Chalcedon to refer to, quote, those territories beyond the geographical boundaries of the other local autocephalous churches. But according to this author, but that's not what the canon explicitly says. It's an interpretation. He sees it as an interpretation. On its face, the canon seems to refer only to bishops who belong to the Diocese of Pontus, Asia, and Thrace, who are ministering among certain barbarians. So then it goes into the whole thing with what I was describing. But basically, it goes into a whole thing about how trying to figure out how to deal with that. But he believes overall it's a very literal interpretation of the phrase, the bishops of the aforementioned diocese among the barbarians. So he did say that Saint Nicodemus of the Holy Mountain repeats Zonaras saying, not only are the metropolitans of the said diocese to be ordained by him, but indeed also the bishops located in barbarian regions that border on the said diocese, as for instance those called Alani, are adjacent to the flank, the diocese of Pontus, while Russians border on that of Thrace. But he's saying that nowhere in the commentaries from Zonaras and Bossamon in the 12th century up to St. Nicodemus at the beginning of the 19th is there any hint of the modern barbarian lands theory. And then he talks about Metropolitan Maximus of Sardis. It's a 1976 book on it. But he too does not cite any older source in support. It's a very long article, so I'm going to give you the basics of what he found. Okay, at the beginning of this paper, I quoted the future Patriarch Christophoros of Alexandria, who claimed that the EP began to extend its jurisdiction over the Diaspora only in 1922, that is, with this 1922 Thomas, which was, again, part of this issue of how to deal with America and all the diaspora and all the area, and then the churches in America, the Greek Orthodox churches. Although we can trace the Patriarchate's claim to the Diaspora back a little further to 1908, Christophoros appears to be generally correct. The barbarian lands theory does appear to date to the early 20th century. First, clearly elucidated in the 1908 Thomas, and not asserted with any practical effect until 1922. Patriarch Meletios is the father of the modern Barbarian lands theory, but within a few years he repudiated that theory. He was forced out of Constantinople by the Turks in 1924, and in 1926 he was elected Patriarch of Alexandria. The next year he deposed a priest who was in Morocco, which in ancient times had been under Rome. The priest appealed to the EP, who claimed jurisdiction over Morocco, which at this point would be considered Diaspora. Meletios responded by claiming all of Africa for Alexandria, although up to this point his title only covered Alexandria, Libya, Pentapolis, Ethiopia, and all Egypt. It's here in 1927, in defiance of the Barbarian lands theory, that Alexandria's claim to all Africa begins. The EP didn't accept this all Africa claim until 2001. I suppose that St. Nicodemus at the turn of the 19th century also overlooked the theory, the Canon 28, and perhaps the EP did object to Russian jurisdiction in America, although in some, as yet undiscovered document, because they were only concerned about the Greek churches in America at that time, not the other ones. Simplest explanation, the explanation that is supported by the evidence we do have, is that the Barbarian lands theory of Canon 28 has its origins at the turn of the 20th century, with a sizable Greek diaspora emerged around the world, and then soon thereafter the Ecumenical Patriarchate under Meletios had to reinvent itself in the face of a once in 500 years threat to its very existence. Now we all know about the difficult situation the EP is in Turkey. We've known that, at least, especially people that are in the Greek Archdiocese, okay? My church and others, we've been told this for a long time. We know this. It is limited in its activities under the Turkish secular state, such as controlled elections of the Patriarch, and it makes sure that they don't really grow, their population there. And because of that, I think that's part of the reason why the United States became the patron, the supporter of the PHANAR, okay, the State Department, CIA. But this actually, we can see, goes back to Patriarch Athenagoras, and that's the next thing I'm going to get into. First off, Athenagoras was an extreme lover of America. So I would call it almost like a blind love for America. Almost naive in a way. So he was very involved. He was a metropolitan, I believe, of North and South America in the Greek Church before he became EP. I mean, this is how he's seen, how he sees America. The mythos of America, what in his view America stood for. He believed in a divinely appointed, almost messianic destiny for the United States. In 1954, when he was Ecumenical Patriarch, he had a meeting with the U.S. consul in Istanbul. Here's how the consul described what Athenagoras said. As usual, he talked at some length of his belief that the United States must remain in the Near East for several centuries to fulfill the mission which had been given it by God to give freedom, prosperity, and happiness to all people. Which I found interesting, because that's what America has been saying for what they do in other countries. That was the way they explained it. Their reasoning, even though, as we have seen for the past, 50 years or so, that really hasn't been the real motives. But in any case, that's what he says. And as we know, in March 1942, if people know about Athenagoras, his history here in this, he met with an agent of the OSS, which was the precursor of the CIA. He told the agent, I have 3 bishops, 300 priests, and a large and far-flung organization. Everyone under my order is under yours. You may command them for any service you require. There will be no questions asked, and your directions will be executed faithfully. He was deeply concerned about that the Allies should be victorious. again, to me, he seems a bit more interested in what was going on there. Of course, that was World War II time. But, there's a lot of people at that time were obviously involved in patriotism and all that. But there's a little bit of nationalism, I think, going on with him. But anyway, this is the very strange part, I think, is that he tried to, when he was 56 years old, he attempted to enlist in the U.S. Army. I don't understand this because, as you know, a clergyman cannot enlist in the military unless you're a chaplain. I don't know if that has changed over time, but that's what's always been the case. So I found that very interesting that he wanted to do that. But see, that's how much he was involved in this nationalism and patriotism and all about this war. And that's where I think that he falls short of staying in the spiritual realm, personally. That's how I see it. But, he was turned down. But he continued to work closely with the OSS. One of his tasks was to identify eligible Greek Americans to serve in the military. Under orders from Athenagoras, the bishops and priests of the Greek Archdiocese collected something like 100,000 names in short order, which astonished the OSS. This caught the attention of William Donovan, the head of the OSS, who began direct communications with the Archbishop and letters back and forth. He wrote to Athenagoras saying, "The reports and descriptions of Greek American youth of military age so kindly undertaken by you are coming in splendid volume. The care with which your Grace has managed this important service is of great interest to our armed services, and I wish to express my deep appreciation for your loyal and patriotic assistance." Now the Archbishop writes back to Donovan and says, "My dear Mr. Donovan, I received your cordial letter of March 15th, but upon learning that in the meantime you had departed, waited until your return to write to you. I welcome you and thank you from the bottom of my heart for your letter and its contents. You have obligated me very much because I think I don't do very much for the U.S., to whom I am deeply indebted." And why does he feel that way? I don't know. "I am ready, though, to submit myself to any duty and to make every possible sacrifice to our beloved country, which is fighting for universal freedom and justice and for the new day which is to come." Now, speaking just worldly, yes, everybody was involved in the war effort at that time. But someone who is a bishop should be fine to, pray for the people in the war, pray for the soldiers, pray, things like that. But this seems a bit over the top. "I was in Washington a few days ago and would have come to see you if I hadn't been called back to New York. Rest assured, though, that at my first opportunity I shall come to Washington to meet you personally and express my sincere admiration toward you. Sincerely yours, Archbishop Athenagoras." Now, it's pretty amazing, says the author, that these documents are public, as it represent the beginnings of a fairly well-known but not well-documented relationship between Archbishop Athenagoras and U.S. intelligence officials. So yeah, as he said, there will be no questions asked. I mean, obviously he blindly believed everything that they were doing was a good thing. There's this naivete there that he thinks everything they do is on the up and up. Everything is perfectly pure and great. No questions asked. Everything will be directed. I mean, the man seems to be very much involved in America. He remained a valuable resource for U.S. intelligence. OSS reported a report prepared sometime after December 31st, 1944, lists Athenagoras among its key contacts. The OSS report comments, the State Department and other executive agencies can hardly cultivate contacts of this sort freely without putting an official cachet on the individuals in question and inviting criticism from politically hostile quarters. But it has been possible for the Foreign Nationalities branch of the OSS, however, to talk intimately and as frequently as needed with such men. The list of such men includes not only Athenagoras, but also the Albanian bishop Fanoli and the Serbian bishop Dionysi. So apparently they're talking to them as well. Of course, that time period again, but still, all of these are very involved in this American government and its intelligence agencies. Now, the interesting part is that the relationship between Athenagoras and the U.S. government proved to be mutually beneficial. When Athenagoras was elected Ecumenical Patriarch in late 1948, he was flown to Istanbul on President Truman's presidential plane, which was named bizarrely the Sacred Cow. From his new post at the Phanar, Athenagoras served as a pro-American counterweight to the pro-Soviet Moscow Patriarchate. Now, that's a story for another day. Yeah. So that to me shows me why a lot of those who are in the Ecumenical Patriarchate are very much heavily leaning towards America because of this historical background. So that's what happened with this issue. And this explains how the historical background came together. Now, we're going to fast forward to the more current time, and I'm going to share with you one last thing for this segment. This is April 28th, 2023, okay? As we see, the ties are still there. Constantinople's Archbishop Elpidophoros gives speech to U.S. intelligence community. Now, he is the head of the Patriarchate of Constantinople's Greek Orthodox Archdiocese of America, as everybody knows. But he was an honored guest at the National Intelligence University in Maryland earlier this week, where he delivered an address to the U.S. intelligence community. The university brings together faculty and students from all 18 of the nation's intelligence communities. The Archbishop talk on Russia's weaponization of religion in the Ukraine conflict was the first ever address from a GOARCH leader at the U.S. intelligence community. Russia's weaponization of religion. Very interesting, because it seems that America is connected to this whole thing. I mean, we have the Archdiocese obviously has ties to the American government and the obviously these intelligence agencies, but does not see a problem with that. Because I guess, we're American, we can be with the intelligence agencies, but instead of, where's that separation of church and state that America supposedly has, right? The Patriarchate of Constantinople has a long history of cooperation with the U.S. intelligence community, as detailed in documents released, as I already showed you. President Dr. J. Scott Cameron of the National Intelligence University invited Archbishop Elpidophoros to share his unique perspectives, insights, and experiences about the religious dynamic of the Ukraine conflict. Share his insights. Says, quote, His Eminence delivered a speech on the Ecumenical Patriarchate's granting of autocephaly to the Ukrainian Orthodox Church and discussed the implications of Russia's distortion of the Orthodox faith in the Ukraine conflict. Recall that Constantinople's granting of autocephaly to the schismatic Orthodox Church of Ukraine was a joint project with the Ukrainian and U.S. governments, as had been acknowledged by both ecclesiastical and political figures. So, Metropolitan Macari, the head of the former Ukrainian autocephalous Orthodox Church, which joined Constantinople's OCU in December 2018, has spoken publicly several times about the role of Western governments in the creation of the OCU. He said in December 2018 that the provision of autocephaly to the OCU by Constantinople was possible because of the work of foreign diplomats, including U.S. ambassadors and others. He addressed the issue following June, stating it's not only the merit of Poroshenko, but also the Verkhovna Rada, Ukrainians themselves, and the diplomats of the USA, Great Britain, France, and Germany who were interested in the church. Yeah, they're interested in the church. And the only reason they'd be interested, in my opinion, is geopolitically. And we all know, of course, former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, January 2021, tweeted about the U.S.'s work in getting Orthodox churches to recognize the schismatics. That May, Valery Chely, the Ukrainian ambassador to the U.S. from 2015 to 2019, said the U.S. can consider the creation of the OCU its own achievement. He stated on air, for the American side, by the way, this might not be known in the president's office. The key foreign policy topic has been freedom of religion recently, and the issue of an autonomous church are promoted by Ukraine with the support of our partners. The United States did, I can say this now, a great deal to make this issue a reality for Ukraine. This is a huge achievement that they consider their own as well. Maybe it's exaggerated, but there are such sentiments. Yes, as we know, what happened in 2014, and we see the direct ties of our government to our Greek Orthodox Church Diocese of America. So that's what I have for you right now in segment 1, part 1 of this series that I'm doing. And we'll get to up to the present again on this problem with the UOC, the OCU, the PHANAR, the Russian Orthodox Church, the GOARCH, and all that in the next segment. Thanks for watching. Thanks for following my channel. If you haven't pressed that notification button so that when my videos come out, you can be notified. Please like my videos if you think they're worth liking. It helps algorithms. And subscribe if you haven't, if you find my content interesting. Thanks.